Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sherry Bennett, and welcome to our very first podcast for Let's Talk Cannabis. I started Let's Talk Cannabis 3 years ago. We're a diverse group of professionals that want to create a culture of responsibility. Because as we all know, cannabis is here to stay, and there's a lot of incorrect information. So we're here to gather the experts, interview those with lived experience, and to educate the world about really something that affects every single human being on this planet. I'd like to introduce Shalynn Kinsman to my right. Shalynn is our digital media strategist for Let's Talk Cannabis. And all I have to say is thank you, Shalynn. He's helped me so much with our new blog platform, letstalkcannabis.ca, and he is actually a digital doctor. That's what I call him. He's just a brilliant mastermind in all things digital media. So we're happy to have Shalynn on board. Shalynn will be taking over our podcasts from time to time and interviewing people over the phone. And to Shaylynn's right, I'd love to introduce everyone to Shalynn Hamilton, a very, very dear friend of mine. And Shalynn is here to tell us all about a little bit about her personal story with cannabis and a not-for-profit organization that is one of my favorites, frankly, called Medicinal My Way. So, welcome everybody, and let's talk cannabis.
Thanks for having us.
So Shalynn, may I start with you? So
Sure.
How is it that you got interested in cannabis in the first place?
Sure. So I had been a recreational user for some time, but it wasn't really until 2017 that I started thinking about it medicinally for myself. I knew it existed, of course, to great effect for a lot of people. I was grieving a parent and recovering and dealing with some pain from a car accident a few years previous from I was hit by a drunk driver.
Wow.
And so things got to sort of an unmanageable point for me with my anxiety. I was not sleeping, not eating. I couldn't focus or remember anything at all.
Wow.
I was having more frequent and more intense panic attacks, one of which I mistook and sent myself to urgent care.
Yeah.
So I went to my doctor. I got into counseling and started building coping tools to manage and sort of mitigate some of the anxiety symptoms I was feeling. I even went on some medication. That worked for a little while, but it was probably one of my lower days where nothing seemed to be working. And I thought, I'll give it a try. So I reached for my pipe, and it had always made me feel calm before, relaxed, helped me sleep,
Right.
and it did exactly what I wanted it to do.
Yeah.
I was able to calm down, employ my other tools,
Right.
and pull myself out of a pretty bad panic episode, and I was convinced from then on.
Wow, I love hearing that story. And I'm just going to share my experience too with having I live with symptoms of post-trauma, PTSD. And for well over 20 years, I was suffering greatly. And the doctors, what they do is they give you antidepressants and benzodiazepine, sleeping pills, and tranquilizers. So I had several clients ask me, elder clients, funny enough, to get them legal access to medical cannabis. And I decided I wanted to do research for myself too. So for the past 3 years, I've been taking cannabis every single day with not only significant results, I would say with superior results. Because those of us that have post-trauma or PTSD, deal with nightmares and flashbacks and anxiety off the Richter scale. And of course that all ties into sleep disruption, right? Which many people use cannabis for. So I've interviewed thousands of people. I've had the great privilege of meeting so many fascinating educators, doctors, nurses, patients, everybody in the industry you can imagine, right? And so I feel that I would like to, and I studied this subject obsessively, frankly, and I want to talk about just a little bit about why this plant was prohibited in the first place. Like, do you know anything about that? Did they ever teach you that in school, or why? What was your impression about cannabis?
Well, ever since I've kind of been in high school, cannabis has always been a negative.
The devil weed,
yes,
or
exactly.
something, right?
Well, I think mostly the reason why, because the education behind it, people didn't know what cannabis was and the benefits it could cause or it could help someone with.
Right.
So yeah, through all I can just find in the last year or two, it's definitely gotten more awareness, and people are actually starting to take cannabis a little bit more seriously as a medicinal alternative. But yeah.
Well, and I understood from your resume, which was just the most glorious resume I've ever read, you know.
Well, thank you.
But he said it really was because you were just the right, human being and skill set that we needed for Let's Talk Cannabis, and you're doing such a really good job right now.
Thank you.
So in school, I understand you did a thesis or a project on cannabis, did you?
Well, so how I kind of got started in the cannabis, or my interest in cannabis, was actually from my parents.
Oh.
They actually my dad suffers from rheumatoid
arthritis.
And my mom suffers from Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
And they've always kind of been on medications and looking for alternatives that don't kind of put a negative effect on their life.
Right.
So they started taking cannabis oil and from the syringe and putting it under their tongue.
Right.
And they noticed that there was actually benefits, because the alternative would be maybe to come home and have a glass of wine to feel more relaxed, whereas cannabis is more a medicinal benefit, and I find alcohol shouldn't be.
That's right. Alcohol is actually
or
the
prescription
worst.
medication.
Or prescription Tylenol 3s and that sort of thing. We all need them, of course. We need opioids, right? We need them. If I had kidney stones, I would be begging for morphine. But for chronic pain, it seems cannabis is effective for many, many different conditions.